Hello, Andrew. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good.
Late evening for you. Friday late evening.
A little bit late on, but well, I'll stay up a bit later on a Friday.
Okay. And about 40 people have registered.
Excellent.
And there are also people they join through LinkedIn and others. We don't get direct contact, but later on we can let you know. And
Sure.
And all the recording and presentation will be available in YouTube. And so everything is lined up. And AL Circle provides wide advertisement for this thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And after this thing, we will require your just presentation, not the recorded one, just general presentation, so that we can put it on IBAAS website for some time. Okay.
Yeah. No problem.
Okay. So if we have another 13 minutes to wait, and then we'll go ahead.
Yeah, and a bit of Q&A at the end, I believe.
Yes, certainly. That will be the most interesting. And your presentation.
I'll make sure I don't fall asleep during my presentation. Just joking.
Keep a glass of wine with you. You'll not fall asleep.
Oh no, I just have a bit of water here. Not too exciting.
Or keep some tea.
Yes.
And it is 4 o'clock in India. No, 3:48 in India. Another 12 minutes.
Yeah. 8:18 here in Brisbane.
8:18 Brisbane. Well, Vladimir is also there. He is
Vladimir,
Rio Tinto. And you are from Melbourne. Which place you are, Vladimir?
I am in Perth.
Perth. He is in Perth. So he is 1.5 hours. 2.5 hours. No?
2 hours. 2 hours.
2 hours.
2 hours. Sorry, 2 hours. Yeah. So for him, it is evening 6 o'clock.
What are you up to these days in Perth, Vladimir?
Just telling a shocker. I'm not actually working in Alumina. A couple of years ago, I joined Rio to work with lithium, but I worked 20 years with Alcoa and Hydro in the alumina industry. Yeah.
Yes. There's lots of great stuff going on in other minerals also, and especially lithium. There's a good crossover with alumina.
Yeah,
I know quite a few alumina people working there these days.
Yeah, it's a new industry, so not many people have experience, and they are getting many people from alumina. Yeah.
Good. It's a good idea.
Welcome, Shankar. He is from Hindalco, Belgaum, Chief R&D. Oh, George Veneboldi. Good afternoon. George Veneboldi is also there, our old friend.
Yeah.
And today morning, I was talking to Mahadevan. He will also join.
Okay. I met George recently, and I didn't think he was that. I didn't think he was that old. At least he was introduced to me as being a pretty young guy.
Yes.
And he celebrated his birthday when he was there. Do you remember that, George?
Interesting.
I think you might be on mute there.
Your voice is mute, George.
Well, now, yes. Thank you. It's good to see all of you, and I really enjoyed having a chat with you, Andrew.
It was nice. Yeah. Likewise. Yeah.
So we will have another 9 minutes, and hope some more people will join. 4 o'clock, 4:05. So
Is that regular tea, or are you having the masala chai there, Ashok?
no masala chai. This is a regular tea. This is just like Chinese, leaf and water, nothing else, and keep
Very
adding water.
Yeah.
I like that way, drinking a lot of this thing. But you know, it is a summer period in India, and Nagpur is sizzling 44,
Yeah.
45 degree maximum temperature. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
minimum, and this is the peak period. Actually, we say this 9 days are peak summer period, and 3rd June it will be over. Then there may be monsoon season may start. So, but this is
cool down a bit with the monsoon.
Yeah, around 15th June, you are expecting monsoon to be there, but already it touched Kerala state. That is the 1st June. So 1 day before it touched already Kerala. Sankar, yeah, he also must be following. You know Sankar?
Yeah.
No,
I don't know Sankar.
Sankar is R&D. Sankar, please introduce. We still have time.
Yeah, I was with Hindal, Alcan days, and then Hindalco. So I was the head of innovation center in Belgaum for the Alumina.
Right.
Yes.
So
you are with Alcan, right, Andrew?
No, I'm with Worley.
Earlier,
I started off my career at Organish Alumina in Ireland. At the time, it was Alcan, or partially Billiton, but mostly Alcan, then 100% Alcan, and later it became Glencore. Now it's Rusal,
Right.
since I left.
Yeah. Ashok.
Yes.
Have you seen this news item today?
What is that? No, I'm not able to. What is that? Please go through. Please go through.
It says Ramdaspet of North Ambazari Road recorded 56 degrees.
I don't know. The 56 is too high. No. That's not a correct one. 46, 45. No, may not.
It says the boiling point. News item.
It may be there in the Gulf countries because my brother is in Kuwait Oil Company. He reports for 53, 54, but not in India. India 48, 49 maximum it goes, and I think, but that is too much. Brisbane must be cool at present, no?
Yeah, low 20s would be.
Wow. Heaven.
Yeah.
24, 25. Yeah.
Yeah, around that peak during the day, and then 15.
Ashok, I am also sitting without fan, without AC.
Wow, you can.
In Belgaum.
Belgaum is better because it is near Goa. You have little bit breezes, and Nagpur is absolutely, you cannot be without AC or thing. Yeah, people are joining one by one, hopefully. So another 5 minutes and we'll start. Kurt Kohelar has joined. Okay, yeah, hydrogen producer. Kurt. Hello, Kurt. How are you? Aluminium, hydrogen from aluminium. Your sound, you are mute.
How's that?
Yes.
Am I muted? Okay, good.
Yes. Okay. Excellent.
Good to have the nice friendly chat before the lecture. It's a nice casual environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I look a bit formal here in my shirt. Worley background, but never mind.
Never mind. Doesn't make difference.
Yeah.
Things are.
There's Mamadou.
Yeah, he must be from Guinea. So there are some people who are interested in even in Guinea to listen you.
I know Mamadou. Mamadou's based in Brisbane these days. Yeah.
Okay, he's in
Yeah.
Britain. Okay.
Yeah.
Working with whom?
Well, he's previously been. I hope Mamadou doesn't mind me saying, but Roussel and he was technical manager at Eurton, I believe, over in
Yes.
Jamaica. So yeah, amongst others, and Gove as well. With Gove, Mamadou as well.
Yeah, I spent some time in Gove.
Yeah, a lot of experience, really.
Okay.
You know Benoit Crystal Ashok. You know
No.
Benoit?
No.
You don't know Benoit? Oh, Mamadou's
Yeah.
has worked closely with Benoit in the past. Ex-Petronet.
Oh.
George might know Benoit.
No, George, no, I know George. George know me.
Yeah.
Okay. I know this Solvay fellow, Alpha Diallo. No, Alpha. What is his name? He's working in
Alpha
Solvay.
Bari.
Alpha Vari. He's my
Alpha
good
Bari,
friend.
yeah.
Just 3 days back, I was talking to him. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
in Solvay, but he worked
Yeah.
long time with Dubal, no, Dubai Aluminium.
Yeah. We have similar path. We started
Okay.
Peshene.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So another 2 minutes, and then there's no need of giving a much introduction for Andrew. I will just say one line, and then Andrew's presentation will be there. Secretary has joined. Who is the secretary? NT has joined. So many people are joining.
Yeah.
Mahadevan. Hello, Mahadevan.
Good afternoon, all of you.
Yes.
Andrew, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mahadevan. Lovely to hear from you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah, Vijay. Okay, many people are joining. So maybe we will keep all the sound silent for after this mood. I am not aware about this mood. Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are stationed. So we have today a presentation by Andrew Furlong. He is from the Worley, and he is one of the well-known alumina technologists. I need not introduce him. He himself will say a few words, and maybe we'll start our recorded presentation. And this will be followed by questions and answers. So you are all welcome to ask questions to him. Although it is little late evening in Brisbane, but we have requested him to be late if there are more questions for him. So, okay, Andrew, so shall we start the recorded presentation, or you like to say a few words?
I'm happy for you to go ahead. Yeah, just
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Priyanka, please start.
Yes, sir.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here, and thank you very much to IBAAS, and in particular to Ashok Nandi for the invite to be able to provide this talk today. So without further ado, I'm going to try and share my screen, and let's get into this presentation. So just bear with me while I get this up and running. I hope that's coming up now. The topic for the presentation is alumina production growth in a decarbonized world. It's a bit of a thought piece. And at the end, we're going to have a little bit more of a technical focus with a few slides on a decarbonization pathway, evaporation retrofit with mechanical vapor recompression. So why did we write this paper? It was basically because we saw two key trends happening. And the first one is that the alumina industry is, of course, decarbonizing, which is actually part of a larger trend of sustainability. And overall, we see decarbonization and sustainability driving a much higher pace of technological change within the industry than what we are used to in our careers. And second very significant trend is the huge growth that we've had over the last 2 decades in the alumina and aluminium industry in China is now slowing somewhat. Not that they're not growing, but it is slowing. So out of that posed two key questions we thought we wanted to answer, which we'll try and cover today. They're very broad questions in a fairly high level manner, given the time. And those questions are, in this context of decarbonizing and having production growth, what would your new refinery look like? And secondly, where should your new refinery be located? A bit of context around the decarbonization is that, which we're all pretty familiar with, is that 2050 requires rapid global decarbonization as per this graph here from the International Energy Agency, showing a massive drop-off in fossil fuel usage to 2050, particularly between 2030 and 2040. And it's similar when we talk about the about the aluminium industry. The International Aluminium Institute has provided its own scenario that aligns with net zero, the 1.5 degree scenario, and that shows a huge fall off in emissions from the industry to 2050. Again, in that 2030 to 2040 period, particularly, which I'm terming here Horizon 2, and that's probably that time frame is probably late 20s and early 30s is probably the time frame of most focus for this presentation. So I want to do a little bit of looking back before we look forward, and also, we're obviously trying to give some predictions overall here about the future, and so there's definitely some crystal ball gazing going on in this presentation, but we think it's not too far in the future, and it needs to be being taken seriously for the decisions of today. But back in 2018, only 6 years ago, Worley had a separate paper where we were actually looking at speculating on 3 possible scenarios for what a refinery might look like 40 years from then, so in 2058. So a long way away, but what we saw was that 3 scenarios that could happen were a business as usual scenario where there's just evolutionary change that we're all used to, continuous improvement in technology, an energy center scenario whereby refineries are moving to be located beside low-cost energy sources, in particular low-cost renewable electricity energy sources, or a local renewables scenario whereby refineries are pushed to stay close to the bauxite mines because transportation has been decarbonized, but decarbonized transport would be very expensive, and therefore that they just use whatever renewables are available locally to them by the mine. So 6 years on, there's been a lot of happening in the energy transition since 2018. There's been an acceleration. So what learnings can we take from that? And we thought there were learnings, and what we see is that each of those scenarios, we can see elements of them playing out. maybe less so the local renewables scenario, but there was an element in the local renewables about this could drive batch operation of some parts of refineries, such as calcination and evaporation. And we see, that's potentially possible in the future when we start electrifying refineries, as penetration of renewables gets very high in grids. But nevertheless, the energy center seems to be the more favored medium term. And the reasons for that is, there's been the huge acceleration in electrification as regards the energy transition, the rollout of wind and solar, etc., is ramping up, and costs of those of renewables are ratcheting down faster than any other aspect of the energy transition. Also, we saw the energy center very much aligned to the large scale rollout. Concentrating industry in an energy center is very aligned to the large scale rollout of infrastructure that's going to be needed to be rapidly delivered to meet net zero by 2050. And thirdly, again, concentrating industry in one location is more aligned to reuse of waste products from one industry as a feedstock for another. So moving on to, let's say, part one of this talk, what will your new refinery look like in a production growth but decarbonized scenario? And first thing to say, despite all the talk we've already mentioned about declining renewables energy costs, but overall, in an electrification scenario, which we see as, again, the most likely, because of all the energy transition technologies, they're the ones that are going to be dropping in cost most, and we also see those technologies has the greatest opportunity for efficiency improvements. But despite that, what we're seeing what we'll see in the future, we believe that the alumina industry's energy bill is going to become a lot more important, and this is going to actually incentivize energy efficient technology. When I say a lot more important, what I mean is actually energy costs could double. And to put that in context, or as an example, I've come up with a typical fossil fuel cost of $7 per gigajoule. There's no real typical cost across the industry because it varies by location, but to pick a line on the sand, I picked $7 per gigajoule, and then I compared that with a reasonable renewables electricity cost of $50 per megawatt hour, which is equivalent to basically $14 per gigajoule put in those terms, which is double our $7 per gigajoule. And so what does that do to our production costs matrix? Well, production costs today in a fossil fuel scenario, I've come up with my own split here, whereby in black there, I've got the energy costs, also shown bauxite costs, caustic costs, and other costs. Of alumina production, we've got about a quarter of the costs are energy costs. But where we have energy costs doubling, it jumps to over 40% of alumina production as energy costs. So obviously, we're going to be paying a lot more attention to it in the future, and it's going to be driving energy efficiencies. So where are we heading overall with this? What we see is, waste reduction, energy transition driving very, very significant changes in refinery technology, and that's going to dramatically alter the inputs and outputs to and from refineries. We're used to the historical setup with large amounts of fossil fuels shown here, in this case coal and gas, being inputted, a lesser amount of electricity, caustic and water, bauxite inputs, and significant amount of CO2 emissions, water outputs, heat losses from a refinery. But in the future, those fossil fuel inputs we see as being displaced by a larger amount of electricity as the energy input. The water usage will drop dramatically, water output will drop dramatically, heat losses will drop dramatically, and we'll see a lot of energy and waste heat being recycled within the refinery and residue being reused. Now, this chart on the right focuses on a decarbonisation scenario. I wouldn't be surprised to come back in 10 years and we're talking about a lot of work being done on bauxite inputs to potentially reduce the bauxite input to the refinery, or even caustic. But that's for another day. Moving on from the last slide, getting to maybe a little bit more focus on one aspect of the energy to refinery and where are we heading. I'm taking an example of the process steam, which is of course the largest amount of energy usage in a refinery is for steam. And what we see with the technologies that we're looking at, that process steam energy could reduce by over 70% compared to a typical refinery today, which I'm showing as a 5.5 gigajoule per ton process energy usage, or around 60% versus the greenfield best practice. And so that's huge energy savings. And at the same time, that technology, which is driving those energy changes, can drive complete elimination of process steam CO2 emissions, and also 80% reduction in refinery water consumption. So it's really a massive change, and this graph is just showing that there's a series of waste heat recovery options available to refineries that, if taken advantage of, can dramatically drop the energy usage of steam, and that in this instance, those technologies are electrification technologies. And another way of representing that would be for a 2 million ton per annum greenfield refinery, let's say, an efficient modern greenfield refinery. That would require about order of magnitude about 250 megawatts on a thermal basis, steam basis, megawatts thermal of energy, but that would be replaced with a much smaller amount, just 100 megawatts of energy, but on an electric basis. I've tried to illustrate in this, there's many technologies that could come into this, so I tried to put them here onto one slide, animated slide at a high level, and I'm showing here a bare circuit where it's fed by steam as the energy source from our steam plant or boiler plant, but we've got waste heat being lost out cooling towers or out stacks and water associated with it. And we've obviously got a calcination process that also loses waste heat and water out of stack. But in future, we may not need this fossil fuel boiler, and we may not be losing that waste heat out through those sources. As a matter of fact, we will recover that waste heat via some means of vapor recompression technology, using preferably electrically driven, and so preferably green electricity driven to avoid the CO2 emissions, and that will recycle that heat. Decompression will provide the steam to the bare circuit. At the same time, we could see that high temperature refineries might become, pure high temperature refineries could become less common as they convert, or newer high temperature refineries become more double digestion style. Double digestion would be where you have a mix of low temperature and high temperature compared to just pure high temperature. And the reason for that is that these compression technologies for recycling of waste heat are more efficient and lower capex when they have to compress to lower steam pressures. So obviously high temperature refinery means high steam pressures. So that's why it's preferable to have a low temperature refinery when you're recompressing waste vapor. And in actual fact, even for a low temperature refinery, this will favor single stream digestion versus dual stream digestion, where you have separate heating of liquor and bauxite slurry. For the simple reason that the steam pressures required in single stream are only about half that needed for dual stream digestion. In addition, for security of energy supply and maybe to take advantage of some arbitrage in day-night electricity pricing, we could see some elements of long duration, large-scale energy storage being installed at refineries, electrically heated, and from the thermal energy storage, we could raise steam for the Bayer circuit, or we might just take the heat transfer fluid, let's say to molten salt, and exchange that directly against the process slurry or liquor in the Bayer circuit. So again, not requiring an actual water plant per se. Next up, we'll try and decarbonize calcination. Now, existing calcination plants, we may be able to retrofit hydrogen. It may be a while before hydrogen prices allow us to do that economically. Potentially, we can retrofit electrically. That could be more challenging. It may be able to be done a partial retrofit, but a full retrofit could be more challenging. On the other hand, there's already demonstration plants up there for a next generation calciner, electrically driven, and we think this is a very interesting future technology. There won't be any need for combustion there without a fossil fuel, so it also opens up different ways to envisage or reimagine heat recovery and heat optimization in the calciner. And also there may be opportunity with these refineries to not necessarily be as constrained as the existing calciners are, having to operate 24/7. These calciners may be more flexible and able to start up and shut down more frequently. That might allow them to align better with variable renewable electricity, say day-night cycles, which will be interesting to optimize for electrical pricing, but also maybe allow hydrate storage as a cheap form of storage for those day-night cycles, and that might also allow for extra flexibility, some element of hot alumina storage. Finally, we see that without listing here, again, we believe there's going to be an additional energy efficiency technologies coming into the Bayer circuit over time. For instance, if we do have a technology that allows us to reduce the amount of bauxite input, that'll obviously mean less, let's say, recovery of iron from the bauxite. That will obviously have less red mud to wash, which will mean less evaporation, for example. So moving on to part 2, where will your new refinery be located? We are not recommending Antarctica, but let's see where this leads us. So a bit of a historical perspective first. And the main point here is that over the last, if we look back over 70 years, we've really had this production has been occurring in specific bursts of growth in specific regions. It's not an ad hoc pattern, let's say. So 50 years ago, as in per green and light blue there, we had actually half of global alumina capacity was in North America and Europe. And thank you to the International Aluminium Institute for these statistics. And then 40 years ago, in black here, where it's labeled Oceania, that represents actually Australia. 40 years ago, Australia was 1/3 of the global alumina capacity. And as little as 20 years ago, China here was 11% of world capacity. Today, it's 58. You know, as this huge chunk here, now 58% of capacity. So a massive, unprecedented growth in the last 20 years. The current trends, well, actually, the Chinese growth is slowing. We've had a continuous annual growth rate of less than 2% in Chinese alumina since 2019, whilst growth in Asia outside of China, of course, of which India is a significant part of, has been stepping up. And a matter of fact, that growth rate in the last 5 years has been over 10%. So what's driving these bursts of growth that we've seen in different regions? Well, there's a variety of key drivers that affect the suitability of different locations. And really, it's the changes in these drivers over time that's led to the historical patterns that we've seen. And no surprises, you know, the changes in these specific drivers is what's going to drive this in the future. And, you know, I've listed at a high level, the drivers are CapEx, OpEx, sales, you know, guaranteed sales for your alumina, risk, and strategic reasons. They can all be broken down into, which I've attempted to do here, into a series of smaller bullet points. In risk, what I've maybe not so important in prior decades, but ESG now has, let's say, been added to the list of things like risk financing, risk and geopolitical. ESG has obviously become a big item and will only be going to be growing in decades ahead. So some examples where these have played out, we've seen on the strategic side a very, you know, strategic government support to underpin the growth in the Chinese aluminium value chain over the past few decades. Australia, where I'm based, that industry was really underpinned by low OpEx, bauxite and energy. But when we look forward, the future growth now appears to be, you know, hampered by high labor costs. And in Guinea, seems like there's a potential activity refinery-wise on the horizon, but to date, you know, despite the huge bauxite resource, there's been very little alumina production there. Obviously, the political risk has been a deterrent to date. So I wanted to look at, in terms of where refineries might be in the future, on some global macro trends. I picked a couple here. Population is one obvious one. And really, this was shown by major region in the world here. What we're showing here is obviously the largest, Asia has got the largest amount of population, but the growth out to 2050 is really only occurring in 2 continents. In Asia, there's still a significant growth, but actually Africa has over 1 billion extra people will be added out to 2050. And in fact, Africa will have been more than trebled in population between 2000 to 2050. Quite extraordinary, really. And then on the GDP side, well, you know, there's this graph, the darker the color, not all countries were covered by this analysis, but the darker the color is showing, you know, the stronger the growth. And it's pretty obvious from the graph, looking at growth rates, projected growth rates out to 2050, that the economic center of the world is shifting. And in emerging markets is where the strongest growth is going to be. And quite a startling statistic, I think, is that, you know, we're all familiar with the G7, those advanced economies. There's an equivalent group of emerging market economies called the E7, which are Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, and Turkey. And the E7 were half the G7 size in 1995, but by 2040, they could be double the size. And by 2050, 6 of the 7 largest economies could be what we term today emerging. So we can see that you know, Asia, Africa, Latin America are the strongest growing regions. And then when we move to bauxite reserves, to give us a clue where future production growth might be. Well, you know, got a graph here of the world's top 10 countries by bauxite reserves. Well, you know, one thing that stands out, first of all, is that bauxite reserves mostly lie in those emerging and developing economies. But also here that the two top countries, Vietnam and Guinea, but they actually hold 26% of the bauxite reserves globally, but they only produce, 44%. Oh, I'm reading that wrong. 44% of the bauxite reserves are held in just those two countries, but they're producing only about 1% of the world's alumina. Yet they sit in regions that are going to see very high population growth and very high GDP growth. So it just stands to reason that you know, apart from being exploited, those bauxite reserves, that one would expect alumina refineries to be located either in those countries or not far away. So going back to how the energy transition might impact refinery location. Well, you know, what we see is, and going back to the energy center theme, we see that new refineries will be more likely to be located in regions that, you know, offer those energy centers. So what I mean by that, they offer low cost carbon-free energy. And also, if they're near bauxite deposits, that'll be a huge advantage at the same time. So what this does, obviously, this provides an energy cost advantage while limiting bauxite transportation cost penalties. Additionally, there's a lot of talk in the world today about supply chain needs, securing supply chains. So if these locations where the refineries are can also address regional supply chains needs, that will obviously make the opportunity more attractive. So I've pulled this chart together. It's fairly interesting that it's divided the world up into. It's a chart of showing the solar and wind technical potential in any country as a multiple of the energy demand. And it's divided the world up into those countries where it's super abundant, which means you're more than 1,000 times the solar and wind potential is more than 1,000 times the energy demand today. Super abundant or abundant, replete or stretched. And again, it really lines up quite well with the GDP graph, that it's basically the emerging, mostly the emerging countries and the same regions that are coming out with the highest multiples here. Now you may so the renewal, so really the message is the renewables opportunity appears strong in emerging markets. Now you might say for Africa, the reason why it stands out is because there's such a low energy demand today. But having said that, there's 39% of the global solar and wind technical potential actually lies in Africa. So that actually demonstrates the opportunity there. So I'm just coming to a few charts here at the end of this first presentation here, and really about when we put those drivers that we were talking about before together, that drive the location of a refinery, they come up with what we're terming here a recipe for a refinery location, and they combine to create a recipe for development in any given country or region. So I've put together some subjective examples of what that might look like in the future for certain countries and regions. They're not, you know, precise. They're just, as I said, subjective. And I welcome anybody here to, you know, try this for themselves and see what numbers they come up with. What I have seen, based on his historical precedents, a score of 70%, which would be higher, 24 out of 35 or higher, seems to indicate favorable conditions for building a refinery. So what I've put here together is a Guinea and a Morocco example. So I've got an example here of Guinea by itself in red. I had a score of 63% when I try and score, you know, these drivers of bauxite, energy, labor, capex, sales risk and strategic. For Guinea, there's very high pros in its bauxite and desire for strategic nation building, and the cons are risk. Maybe that's changing as investors, potentially the Chinese with a lower risk appetite, want to move in there to secure their bauxite supply chain. And I've looked at the potential future scenario in a new energy world of an African solution, whereby Guinea bauxite is transported quite locally further north to Morocco. Morocco has a and that has scored a lot better in my subjective example, 76%. Morocco has better access to cheap renewables, solar and wind. It's lower geopolitical risk. It's got strategic sales into both Europe and Africa, and it's actually got very established infrastructure. It's already got a world-scale phosphate chemicals industry. Obviously, a negative of that scenario is bauxite shipping, but we've limited it by the short distance. Another example I have is an Australia and Indonesia example. All I have in red is Australia by itself. Australia has a lot of advantages. This is an Australian alumina refinery based on new energy. In new energy world, non-fossil world, I've given it a score of 63%. You've got a lot of pros and great renewable energy potential, low risk, bauxite available, but the high labor costs and high capex costs are really pinning Australia back. On the other hand, I've looked at an Indonesian refinery whereby from the north of Australia, renewable electricity is actually, the vast amount of renewable electricity available is actually sent to Indonesia to power a new energy refinery, and that's given a very attractive score of 77%. Obviously, benefits from the low labor costs and capex and the growing market in Indonesia. Brazil is another example. Based in a fossil fuel world, I have a score of 66% for Brazil. The real negative for Brazil is the fossil fuel prices are quite high over there for driving a refinery. Whereas in a new energy world, it's actually a lot more attractive. The scores jumped up to 74%. Brazil is quite well endowed with green energy, so it'll be very competitive. And actually that drives maybe strategic potential to expand more into smelting and open up the full aluminium value chain. Obviously lowers future ESG risk and might open up more the market for providing low carbon alumina and aluminium into the Americas. Finally, I have included India here. I found this one actually quite tricky, so if anyone wants to have a go at themselves, they're welcome. I've got a very attractive score today under a fossil fuel scenario of 81% for India. You know, there's very strong pros, and labor costs, labor and capex are very attractive, and obviously something that's going to continue into the future for a long time. There's a captive sales market, a huge population, growing country, so they're great pros. On the cons, I've just marked slightly down bauxite. It's good quality bauxite, but securing, you know, there's a couple of refineries potentially coming up soon in India. Beyond that, you know, securing bauxite access has been an issue to date, and getting enough bauxite that can be secured could be a risk. It still scores well under the new energy scenario. Again, there's maybe a slightly improved ESG risk because we're using, let's say, a renewable or even CCS. But the cons that I see is which is up for debate, the access and appetite for green energy. India has a captive growth market. It's got a 2070 net zero target, so there really isn't a huge pressure for it to decarbonize, and getting access to green energy with 1.4 billion people, with the refineries mostly on the eastern side, could be a challenge, or the delay in getting access might put future refineries a little bit behind the curve versus the rest of the world. So to summarize, what I'm saying here is that future alumina refining growth we see points really towards emerging economies. It's already playing out. And that these trends are going to be enhanced by the future need for low cost, low carbon energy. So that's actually going to be enhanced by the energy transition. We also say that the design of newer refineries will be impacted by the energy transition in a big way and sustainability demands. And that to avoid regret capital, the impact of the energy transition needs to be factored into plans for new refineries. So thank you very much. I look forward to questions later on this first presentation. I'll now continue with a few slides on the technical piece on evaporation retrofit with mechanical vapor recompression, a pathway to decarbonisation. I'd like to thank Brad Hogan, my colleague, who put these together. So the summary from this slide is really that, as we all know, most of the energy in an alumina refinery is on process heat, whether it's as steam or calcination, which makes it hard to abate. And with that becomes, makes the carbon emissions hard to abate. So with that comes some challenges, because if we do have to transition to a different emerging technology, that might have some uncertainty and some technical risk. And with that, there's always a justification if there's going to be an investment in capital. And depending on the company's commitments or the country's commitments, there also could be some very strong time pressures to meet the decarbonisation targets. And with that, we see a variety of different decarbonisation pathways that could be taken by refineries. The MVR focuses on electrification, taking advantage of low-cost renewable electrical energy, which we see as the prime pathway because of the potential for energy efficiency with that pathway and the rapidly dropping cost of renewables. Another pathway is to modify the flow sheet of refineries, which I hope I covered a little bit in the last presentation, adapt the flow sheet to enable some of these technologies to take root. We can transition to e-fuels, such as green hydrogen. So just basically put green hydrogen in the pipe instead of natural gas, or we can put do a carbon capture solution on our existing fossil fuel boilers. Now, what is MVR? Well, basically MVR, mechanical vapor recompression, it means we're going to be increasing the pressure of low pressure or waste vapor, even if it's under vacuum, from below the pinch point to useful steam above the pinch point. So as per the graph, which shows, let's say the hot side and the cold side of heat transfer through the alumina refinery, we're coming from a waste vapor that's below the cold side, and we're going to recompress that up to a pressure so it's useful to be used on the hot side of a heat exchange surface. What sort of equipment do we actually use for this? The types of the principal type of compression equipment, and there's a number of types, but listed here, probably the ones to focus on be centrifugal fans, certainly in the evaporation area, and maybe multi-stage centrifugal compressors would be another piece of equipment of interest. And what MVR offers is significant efficiency gains over other technologies. We say that's usually discussed in terms of the coefficient of performance, having a coefficient of performance greater than 1. So let's just mention what this coefficient of performance is. It's basically the heat out to the hot source, QH here, over the work in. In this case, the work in will be the electrical work in. We're obviously bringing in waste heat, but that's usually free. And for this application we're talking about here, we're probably talking, around typically a coefficient of performance of 3, 2.5 to 3.5. So we get 3 for for the amount of work or energy put in, we're getting 3 times the amount of heat out. If you're looking at an electric boiler, it's actually less than 1. It's like, let's say 0.96% efficiency. So there's a massive improvement with these technologies. How applicable is an MVR how applicable is it to retrofit an existing evaporation unit with MVR? Well, actually, it's applicable to all types of flash evaporation technologies, where it's multi-stage flash evaporation, falling film evaporators, forced circulation, possible, it's applicable to them all, and it can actually be done. There's a variety of different configurations where we can retrofit, different ways we can retrofit these evaporation units, which we'll touch on now. What we call it in series, in parallel, or hybrid, which is a mix between the series and parallel. We'll also talk a little bit about MVR sparing options. So this is basically a diagram of a multi-stage flash evaporation unit as it looks today with no MVR. We've got our flash vessels and our heat exchangers going through our heat exchangers up to our live steam heat exchanger, heated by live steam, comes back down, flashes from our flash vessels, got many stages, and at the end it goes into a barometric condenser and we've got a cooling tower. We've got a waste energy is lost to the vapor, it goes into the barometric condenser. We've lost it to the cooling water here. Now, in terms of a series operations, a series retrofit of MVR to that evaporation unit, we're actually going to drop the live steam input source and we're going to drop the cooling tower. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the waste vapor from the last flush tank and put it into a series of large fans operating series and recompress that vapor from the low pressure end all the way up to the high pressure end into the live steam heater. So our energy source becomes electricity. We need a little bit of live steam from another place for startup, but otherwise it's electricity. We already have minimal configuration changes to the evaporation unit, but we have this train of compressors we have to fit in. And several large fans in series, could be between, let's say, 5 and 8 large fans in series. When we come to the parallel retrofit scenario, it takes a different approach, but again, we're changing our energy source from live steam to electricity, and we'll be recovering the waste energy and not requiring the cooling tower or barometric condenser. So there's a bit of reconfiguring here, but basically what this scenario is looking like, we're going to take feed, we're going to each flash vessel and its associated heat exchanger will be operating independent from all the other flash vessels and their heat exchanger. And the feed to evaporation will come into each flash tank heat exchanger pair and discharge from, and the evaporated liquor will discharge from each flash vessel heat exchanger pair. So they'll all operate independent of each other. And we will take the vapor from each flash vessel and with two smaller fans recompress the vapor back into the heat exchanger. And it'll be not shown here for simplicity, a recycle pump that recycles the liquor at a large volume through the heat exchanger and back into the flash vessel. So they all operate in parallel. We've got 2 stages of fans, one to overcome on each flash vessel, one to overcome the boiling point elevation, and another one to provide the driving force for the heat exchange. With this scenario, we obviously have less fans in parallel in series, and there is some potential optimization over the series one in that the feed is coming in at all the liquor is all coming in at the temperature that and and the evaporation is all done at a lower temperature that avoids some of the scaling issues that we see at the hotter end of evaporation. And it's likely because we are have less stages of compression that the actual coefficient of performance could be higher in a parallel configuration compared to series. The hybrid scenario is one that has the hybrid scenario has that is, as I said before, it's a mix of parallel and series. So in this case, we've split the evaporation unit into two separate trains, each train of 3 flash tanks and 3 heat exchangers. In terms of sparing and availability on the series or the hybrid scenario, if there is a problem with one of the fans, we would just revert back to using the barometric condenser and cooling water as a standby. Overall, we think the MVR availability and on the train of fans will be higher than 90%. So let's say the electrification benefits would be achieved more than 90% of the time, and where we don't see it worthwhile as needing to invest in additional spare MVR compressors and associated valving and piping. For the parallel, it's a bit of a similar story that we get a high MVR availability because we only have 2 MVR fans in series for each flash heat exchange pair. We expect the availability to be very high, and so we don't see MVR fans, spare MVR fans, as being justified. It's like minimal availability gain for a significant capital. And yes, if one of the flash vessels does need to come off because there's a fan not available, well, it has a small impact because it's just one of a number of different parallel units operating independently. So in summary, on to the last slide now. MVR in evaporation. Well, evaporation can take up 40% of the refinery process heat. Up to 2 gigajoules a ton could be the energy usage in evaporation in some refineries, and we're electrifying. So that's the amount of energy we're electrifying. Probably at a coefficient performance of 3, so we're using actually 1/3 of that 2 gigajoules per ton. We will be recovering the waste heat recovered will improve energy efficiency and will recover a lot of water, resulting in lower operational costs. In terms of retrofitting, why retrofit existing evaporation units? Well, we're actually utilizing most of the existing asset. We're utilizing the flash vessels. We're reutilizing the heat exchangers. So we're minimizing capital spend. We're using known and proven technology in fans. There are some concerns potentially over vapor quality that they happy to take some questions about that, but through vapor scrubbers, demisters, desuperheating water, etc., they can be mitigated. And we see it as an excellent initial step for transitioning away from fossil fuels for steam racing. Basically, it's a strategic, a start in evaporation with MVR is basically a initial learning for refinery. As I said in the previous presentation, there's lots of significant waste heat recovery options available for refineries. Evaporation is a smaller bite and an easier first step for significant energy savings. And before you would move into a retrofit, it's good to identify of those different options available for retrofitting, whether it's parallel, series, or hybrid, which is the preferred option, which has the best economics, and it's going to be different for different setups, and some front-end engineering study is required to select the best option and maximize the economics. So thank you for that. I'm looking forward to questions.
Thank you.
Stop sharing now and end the presentation.
Thanks, Andrew, for wonderful presentation. It was very interesting. And now the live session is open for questions and answers. So Andrew is here and he will answer your queries. Please go ahead.
I'll try and answer.
Okay.
Andrew, a straight question. With the present alumina refinery energy consumption around 7 to 7.5 gigajoules per ton, how much green energy can be introduced? And because we are looking into it very seriously with one of our people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a question of, that's loaded on many fronts because it's a question of economics as well as sustainability, balancing the two, and how easy it is to get, if it's, for instance, going to be renewable electricity based, how easy it is to get reliable supply.
For us, renewables means mostly it must be solar. Wind is not consistent in the area as per our studies.
Yeah.
So if wind is not there, only solar is there, quite bright.
Yeah, but what I've seen, and just turning to India, I've seen a couple of announcements in last year or so. There might have been two, maybe from Hindalco, talking about their smelters. Announcing 100 megawatts of firm power supply or more. Power purchase agreements. They're going to get continuous 100 megawatts or more of renewables for their smelters, right? And I put up on, I think there was a slide there about process steam energy usage could drop a lot with some of this new technology. And I think I'll put something up saying, for a greenfield refinery of 2 million tons, you're talking about 250 megawatts of thermal energy, let's say, being needed by the refinery. But if it's done in a electrification manner by some of these waste heat recovery technology, then the efficiencies mean you're down to like 100 megawatts. So the 100 megawatts of energy being needed. So the 101, first of all, in terms of the supply of energy to the refinery, I can't talk about specific locations, but obviously that chunk of 100 megawatts, we've seen, even in talk to the Indian location, we've seen several announcements for a major producer like Hindalco wanting to get that size chunk to one of their smelters. So I'm saying there's the potential there to do that for the refinery, and that to me would take care of all the energy needed for the process steam for a refinery. And what I see is for instance, that technology is capable of decarbonizing all the steam to a modern refinery. You can use, take out, we've talked about in the last few slides there about evaporation. There's also obviously the biggest steam user is digestion. And I think there's potential to replace all the steam to digestion. But is anyone going? Are you going to go and tomorrow do that? Maybe you do it in a bit of a bite size. But anyway, the potential is there. We see the potential is there to. Yeah, there's enough waste heat to supply all digestion steam. So basically 100% replacement. Calcination is maybe a different story. That's harder beast, but talking about process steam, yes.
When coming to evaporation, one more question, if you don't mind. When coming to evaporation, will you do the engineering completely and only get the supplies out, or you will associate yourself with the evaporator supplier?
Well, you're talking about Worley now. When we make a company position, but well, we were talking about there about the the retrofit of evaporation units, and I think there's someone like Worley has value to offer in terms of understanding, presented a few different configurations and working through with the refinery, given their constraints, let's say on the electricity side, etc., and what's the sizes of their flash vessels, etc. What would be the best configuration to do that? If you're a greenfield refinery, well, there's no need to retrofit an existing evaporation unit. If you've got, again, if you've got the electricity available, it's an opportunity to get some renewable electricity in, preferably renewable, in, and feed it to a greenfields MVR unit, which suppliers can supply. Someone like GEA supplies these units to other industries. MVR is quite common to them and for other suppliers. So I think if it was a greenfield unit, you wouldn't be having it. It's a smaller footprint. The MVR, it wouldn't be looking like the evaporation units we're used to today, where there's lots and lots of flash vessels in series. It's really just one flash vessel and a heat exchanger and a few fans of a certain capacity, and then they replicate that if they need more capacity. So yeah, greenfield, I think you go to direct to the supplier. If you want to retrofit, someone like Worley can help.
Okay.
So this is Amit Mati. I'm working as a tech analyst.
It's just a bit. The volume is a bit low there.
Low.
Possible? Yeah, hard to hear. Maybe adjust your mic. It's quite low.
Who is George? You have some question?
Well, I would like to make one remark. Congratulations to your very interesting presentation. I'd like to emphasize another aspect of this exercise. You obviously properly pointed out that the heat consumption could be about 7.5 gigajoule per ton of alumina. However, there are several alumina refineries having significantly higher heat consumptions. So I think that that is worthwhile to look at the existing process technology with fresh eyes. And I believe that there are several points when we could reduce the heat consumption of the existing refineries. Let me point just one item. For example, there are several refineries where the liquor to precipitation is cooled by flash cooling. Several years ago in Hungary, we made comparative calculations whether this flash cooling or plate heat exchangers are the best. It was selected the plate heat exchangers, and in this case that there is no heat loss. There is no steam to be cooled by water, which goes to the flash coolers. So obviously you cannot change within 2 days or so. But what I'd like to emphasize that a fresh look of the heat consumptions, where all the new opportunities are considered. I think it is a worthwhile approach. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. I think that's a very valid point. Obviously, in the time frame of all the broad topics discussed, didn't have time to get into all these elements. But yeah, there's well proven such technologies. Basically all greenfield refineries today, and the newer refineries all have plate heat exchangers, for example. And the older refineries, I'm sure there's in a number of the refineries, there's likely to be plenty of opportunity of low-hanging fruit to use well-established equipment to make energy efficient improvements, which presumably should be good economic projects. The presentation today obviously focus a bit more on the up and coming new things we might expect in ahead of us rather than the already established, but it's a very good point.
Good. Any question from Vedanta or Hindalco? Hello. Any more questions?
Any comments about this form is a bit fairly relaxed form? Any comments about I tried to have a few personal examples. I'm not saying they're going to happen, but about locations of refineries in future, and it was more under as we start to move towards seeing more refineries with a more focus on the energy transition, let's say, happening within refineries. But any thoughts from? Just interested to hear one or two thoughts if anybody has them there. I was obviously trying to give my subjective opinion, looking through a crystal ball.
Surely in India, there are going to be another 2-3 refineries in the next 2-3 years. Big one,
Sure
being real, being
Yeah.
real, not announcements. But having said so, cost competitiveness will be the only driving force, because the bauxite cost in India for the new refineries is not going to be as cheap as that for Nalco or Utkal. Even though Nalco and Utkal are the lowest cost operating producers in the world, for others who are going to come into the market, or for that matter, Vedanta was already there announcing 5 million and 6 million. The bauxite cost is not going to be so cheaper like that of Nalco and Utkal. So all of us are looking for a challenging, miserly way of, what do you call it, improving the capacity so that we can all survive during the downturn of the market.
Well, hopefully we can help you there. I know the focus is, I was focusing today on all these things are getting a lot of airplay in the challenges ahead for the long term, but obviously there's the here and now as well, the incremental improvements, and trying to make sure that businesses are there to to profit. So we've got to help the businesses profit.
Okay, thanks, Andrew, for your all presentation and this question answer session. And IBAAS may receive some more questions, so we will just forward it to you.
Sure.
Whatever questions. And this is very interesting, and particularly location, I will have a separate discussion with you, one-to-one, so where there may be some interesting things. Thank you very much for everybody. There were at a time about 39 delegates were there. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.
Thank you. All the best, everyone.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Very nice. Thank you.